Hi, everyone. Welcome to Brad and I having our second LinkedIn Live. As you know, if you've been following us, or maybe you don't know, we are the co-founders of Super Crucial Leader Retreat, and we are super excited to be here with you today for the second LinkedIn Live. Leaders, how to turn your challenges into opportunities. And just as a refresher for everyone, I'm Cheryl Cran. I am the founder of Next Mapping. I'm a future of work expert. I'm the author of 10 books, the latest one, Super Crucial Human, and have been working in the field working with leaders, CEOs, CFOs, CTOs, senior leaders for over 20 years, helping them to be future ready, helping them to be on the leading edge of change, and helping leaders go through the change that happens as a result of wanting to be future ready. So Brad, why don't we pass it over to you for a self-introduction?
Thanks, Cheryl. I'm Brad Breininger. Hi, everyone. I am the EVP of Strategy at Believeco, a marketing, brand, and PR agency across North America. In addition, one of the co-founders of Super Crucial Leader Retreats. And I've been working in brand and leadership training and facilitation and coaching for the last 20 years and have, like Cheryl, have been working with quite a wide range of leaders and organizations, really on their brand, how they show up in the world, and want to apply all of that into the learnings at the Super Crucial Leader Retreats.
Yeah, and just as a reminder to everyone, we are having our inaugural leadership retreat on May 7 to 9, the beautiful city of Vancouver at the Fairmont Hotel Vancouver. Space is limited, so we are encouraging you, if you're at all interested, please hop over to supercrucialleader.com. And if you have any questions, you can contact us through there, but you can also message us through LinkedIn or however you want to connect with us. So let's get into today's content if we could, and what we're going to be talking about. And so today is leaders turn your biggest challenges into opportunities. And let's just face it right now and say that the challenges are many. Brad and I, if you know, when you have the behind the stage before you come on, Brad and I were having conversation around all the leaders that we're interacting with and how the challenges are not diminishing, they're actually increasing. And the challenges, typically, it's not so much around the technology, because let's face it, technology is pretty easy. You tell it what to do and it's pretty reliable and typical. It's the people challenges. And when we look at a human first future, which is what we are really about with Super Crucial Leader Retreat, is we're talking about how do we leverage the human to human contact and connection while leveraging AI to help us automate the mundane. So I like to say, let's automate the mundane so we can elevate the humane. And so the challenges that we're facing are often around the people dynamics. And for purpose of today's LinkedIn Live, we're only going to focus on 3 of the challenges, but trust me, there are many. We have just surveyed thousands and thousands of leaders, and I can tell you there's at least a dozen challenges that leaders are facing right now and looking for solutions. And some of those solutions are quite obvious, but maybe they're obvious, but we don't want to do them. And some of the solutions are really an opportunity to relook at how we're doing things. So let's just get right into the agenda for today. And I'm going to be doing most of the talking on today's LinkedIn Live, but we want Brad's insights and expertise here. So we'll be going back and forth. But if you're hearing my voice a lot, that's why is I'll be doing most of the talking in this one today. So the agenda, what are the current challenges leaders are facing? And again, I've selected 3 out of our total survey results, and these seem to be the top 3. So we'll go through them. We'll be looking at strategies to reframe those challenges into opportunities. A lot of times we can get stuck with our challenges, and especially as leaders, gone are the days where we have to have the answers to all the challenges. It's really about crowdsourcing. It's about collaboration. It's about getting insights from places we normally wouldn't. And then thirdly, the practical steps to navigating ongoing challenges, because resiliency isn't about hoping that the challenges will go away. Resiliency is the ability to acknowledge the challenges and then leveraging our creative innovation mindset. And before we keep going on the agenda, Brad, is there anything that you would add to what I've opened with there?
No, I think, Cheryl, I think you covered everything well. one of the most important things in the retreat is we're going to have an opportunity to dive into these things at a much deeper level than we can do on LinkedIn Live. And so if you get the chance to be there in person, I know for a lot of us, there hasn't been a lot of in-person learning, a lot of in-person facilitation that's gone on. It's been very virtual, and virtual is wonderful, and the LinkedIn Live today will be great. But just keep in mind, as you're listening to all of this and as we're taking you through these challenges, that getting us all together in a room to go through them, to expand our thinking around them, and to really come at them together is the best opportunity about these retreats. So keep that in mind. We'd love to see you there.
Wonderful. Well, let's keep going here. So let's look at the current challenges. So, the first one is a really, I would say, wide and deep challenge. And in our work, in my work, and then in Brad's experience with his hybrid team, the challenges are really, in my opinion, indicative of a number of things. So we could have almost predicted these challenges, actually, based on research on Generation X, millennials, Gen Zs, and what they're wanting in the workplace. So before the pandemic, all of the younger generations were saying, we want more flexibility. And in fact, dare I say, not just the younger generations, excuse me, the Zoomers are baby boomers who refuse to age. So the Zoomers and the Gen X and all of the generations were looking and seeking for more work-life balance. And so they were asking for it pre-pandemic. And what typically organizational leaders were saying is not possible. We don't have the infrastructure. When in fact, the pandemic hit, and guess what? Bada boom, bada bing. We all had to adjust at the speed of change, and we all did. And all of a sudden, hybrid can be done. And in fact, it showed us that it actually increased opportunity in many ways, which I'll talk about as we continue going forward. The other challenge is culture. In my consulting work, I hear a lot of leaders go, hybrid has led to a diminished culture. We don't have the culture that we used to have. And a lot of times that is a traditional mindset that says you can only have a positive culture if everybody's all in the office at the same time. Well, again, we've proven that that's not true. Are there challenges of hybrid that leads to cultural challenges? Absolutely, yes. However, that becomes a leadership opportunity, which we'll talk about in a few moments. And then the other big challenge is finding workers. So on one side, people are afraid of AI. They're taking jobs. Well, oh my God, the robots are coming. We're not going to have any workers. And then the other side is, oh my gosh, I can't find any good workers. So where is it? Where's the truth? Well, the truth is actually somewhere in the middle. We are predicted to have a worker shortage till at least 2030. And that is statistically proven by World Economic Forum and Gallup and a number of research sources. And so we are going to continue being challenged with finding workers. And that's because we need people who can work in ambiguity. We need people who can be future ready. We need people who are change leaders. So it's not just finding a warm body anymore. It's about finding people that can help us elevate our goals, help the organization move the needle forward in its organizational goals, and help leaders feel that they've got the right people on the bus to drive the company forward and to drive success forward. So again, I'll pause and Brad, if you have anything to add to those challenges from your perspective.
Yeah, I think that Shirley hit the nail on the head for all of those. I mean, in your experience in both the predicting the future of work, but also in the now of work, a lot of stuff has come true. And like you said, you're not surprised at all, and neither am I. It's interesting, attached to all of those things, whether it's the hybrid teams, whether it's the culture, I also think that people have evolved because of the pandemic. So
yes,
what culture meant pre-pandemic is very different than what culture means now. Hybrid pre-pandemic was quite different. Hybrid meant that, you were sick or ill or out of the office, and maybe someone would bring their laptop to the meeting and put you on
sure.
screen. Whereas now it's a lifestyle. Like it's really about looking at these challenges not only as a way to solve them, but understanding how they've infiltrated the culture, how they've infiltrated the way we work. And for a lot of leaders, it's almost like, and I hear this all the time, leaders saying, oh, I can't wait for it to get back to the way it was. And
Yep.
I say to them, it's never going to go back to the way it was. And sometimes people are surprised by that. And they kind of go, well, how can we maintain this? How can we stay like this? This was a moment in time. And I often say, no, it was not a moment in time.
Mhm.
The moment in time was your pre-pandemic thinking. What you need to do now is evolve your thinking the way the culture and the society has evolved to embrace these issues. And it's interesting because right now we call them challenges because as leaders, we're dealing with some of the issues around them. But, you know, in a short period of time from now, they won't be seen as challenges. They'll just be seen as the way it is. And so, getting from challenge to the way it is something that I think we can really help all of you with.
Yeah, excellent. Well said. And I think it's, what you said about it's not going back to the way it was. In my work, when people say that, that is a clear indicator of resistance to change.
Yeah,
And,
100%.
and that's not a judgment. It's just a whenever we're wishing for something to be what it used to be, we're actually resisting reality from a psychological standpoint,
And
right?
what I
So
say, it's an
yeah,
indicator of where they need to work, right? So
correct.
as a consultant, and this, as
Yeah.
a consultant, it's a really strong indicator that, let's break that down and let's figure out how to change that mindset.
Exactly, which leads us right into, the next comment around each of these challenges is that if you think of hybrid as an example as a challenge, there's pros and cons to hybrid, right? So one of the pros is it's actually created diversity. When you think about and inclusivity, when you think about how more people can be included in a project or in a group dynamic or for insight, that has been a positive of hybrid. Another positive is people saying they have more free time, more personal time. They're not commuting. Which the pro for the organization and for a leader is you have happier employees, you have happier workers because of the hybrid opportunity. But I would say that hybrid in itself is we get fixated on it, but it's really about flexibility. So the social change that has driven this is flexibility. People want to have flexibility. Zoomers used to think work, 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 and then you die. Whereas today, it's like the younger generations, I feel, have taught us a lot around life first, work second.
Mhm.
And I think that has permeated throughout the culture. And that's what some leaders are challenged with. Dealing with. So the cons from some leaders' perspectives include, well, everybody's dispersed. So I can't control the narrative within the organization. Or, well, I don't know if people are really working. I can't see them. Out of sight, out of mind. They mustn't be working as hard. Now, let's just pause here for a moment here, people. How many of us have worked in offices for years and you could see people sitting at their desk, but you could not guarantee that they were working, right? And so this is the predicament we're in is truth versus reality. And so the hybrid pros and cons are there. And in my experience, the leaders who are really being successful right now are the ones that are adapting their leadership to the realities of the hybrid pros and cons. So they're recognizing the benefits, but they're also rather than looking at the cons as negative, they're looking at it as, well, how do we build inclusivity if everybody's dispersed? Well, how do we give opportunities for promotion if people are primarily remote? So it raises more powerful questions. And the other piece is hybrid biases. And I see so much of this. And when we present live, we have movie clips and we've got audio clips and we've got all sorts of fun things that we do to really, anchor these points that we're making. But the hybrid biases include remote bias. There are some people who their entire career has been in office, so their preferred bias is in office. And so therefore, when they look at somebody working remotely, they have judgments like, oh, he or she can't, or they can't be working as hard as they say they are, or, oh, they must be taking their dog for, like, there's these little mini judgments that are biases that actually hinder true collaboration across in-office and hybrid or remote. And then there's also remote bias. So on the other side, if somebody's hired remotely, they have a bias of not knowing necessarily what's going on in office on a day-to-day basis. So these biases can hinder true connection, true human to human connection in a workplace. And I'm on a mission, and I know Brad and I are aligned with this because our brands have come together to partner for super crucial leadership retreats, pardon me. I'm on a mission to really take advantage of this time we're in, this era we're in, to help people be more human to human, to be better humans, so that these challenges become opportunities for greater connection, greater evolution, greater opportunity for growth. And then lastly, measuring results. So a lot of times with hybrid, we say, well, how do we measure the results? Well, with AI and with the technology tools available now, it's very easy to measure results. So that's no longer an excuse. We can measure. What it means is we have to be, as leaders, doing our best, our very, very best when it comes to performance management, our coaching conversations, our one-on-one conversations, our expectation setting about the results, having regular conversations around whether they're meeting the results or what they can do to improve the results, having candid, crucial conversations around what's holding them back from having greater results. For instance, do they have childcare challenges? Do they have, like, we're humans. We have human, real life things going on that may be factoring in. And let's be honest, 20 some years ago, 30 years ago, when I started in finance, if I said to my boss, I have anxiety, I would have been.
You wouldn't have said it. You wouldn't have
I
said
wouldn't have said it, Brad,
it.
because you're right. We wouldn't have said it because you know why? We would have been either seen as not serious about our career,
Right.
or we would have been seen as, whoa, this is professional. We don't get personal here. Well, look how far we've come.
Yeah.
Because what I do admire about the younger generation, Brad, is they say, I have anxiety. I'm feeling anxious. I'm
Right.
feeling overwhelmed. And so we're able to have these conversations, right? What do
Yeah.
you say? Yeah.
We used to have, it's funny, we used to have phraseology that did that. Do you remember that old phrase, he took to his bed or she took to her bed? Like
Yes, yes.
it was like we used to say things like that for things like anxiety, depression, all of that
Yes.
kind of stuff. And it's funny because, when you look at the human factor, we didn't used to talk about the human factor as much because we were just always around each other. But there was this wall. There was this wall between your professional attitude and your personal life. And, it I think now the walls are different. The walls now are a screen, whether it's a phone screen or an iPad screen or a computer screen, doesn't matter. So again, as humans, we still have these walls. We just have to learn to deal with those walls in a different way. And from a hybrid perspective, and I manage a hybrid team. I have people all across the country that I'm constantly, working with. And whether it's the team that I'm leading or the team that I work with on a daily basis, and they're even farther between. And so we're often on screens, and getting to the humanity piece of it is very different than getting to the humanity piece of it used to be. I still think that the humanity piece is hugely important. We just have to have a different set of skills to get us to it this time. So yes, we're really open about anxiety and feeling and our personal viewpoints on things. But, that connection piece is probably one of the hardest things, whether it's social media, whether it's AI, whether it's just technology in general. Getting ourselves connected is one of the biggest challenges, and it's related to all the things that you've talked about. And we'll definitely go into that more at the retreat.
Absolutely. Yes. No, excellent insight. So we'll keep going. And so when we talk about the specific challenges of culture, I said earlier that I've had many leaders say to me, well, culture is diminished and culture is not what it used to be, or hybrid has, affected culture negatively. So all of those things I've heard. But what I want to make the point here with culture is I think it's time for a mind reset here, because culture is not location specific.
No.
Culture is an attitude. Culture is a feeling. Culture is a connection. Culture is a commitment. And I want to remind everyone of a phrase that they probably heard a gazillion times. People don't leave their jobs, they leave their leaders. And culture is around creating an environment, hybrid environment, where people feel seen, they feel included, they feel like they're adding value, they feel like their voice is heard, they feel like they're part of something bigger than themselves. And so the opportunity for leaders today is, am I doing that as a leader? Am I embodying culture? Am I inspiring culture? Am I having culture conversations with my team on a regular basis? So we'll keep going here.
Yeah.
And then the worker shortage, as I said earlier, the worker shortage is here until at least 2030, and it's hitting every single industry. every single industry. I have another slide that I'm not sharing here today, but I do share with other groups when I'm presenting in person, is a slide around the jobs that are going to be created as a result of AI. So a lot of us are afraid of it taking jobs, but it's actually creating a whole new era of work that has never been created before. So if you have any Gen Zs, anyone in your life 20 and younger, they're going to be doing work that was not even thought of in today's environment. So when we look at worker shortage, we're looking at it through existing work, but we're also looking at it as future jobs that we need people to fill those positions. But then there's another factor that we never hear about in the media. We never hear about it in the news. We never hear about the number of people that are becoming freelance or outsourced contractors or starting their own business. And the stats would astound you to the number of people who've said, you know what? The culture of my organization is not supporting me to feel the way I want to feel. So I'm just going to go freelance, or I'm going to go contract, or I'm going to go become an entrepreneur. So these trends, these social movements are all contributing to. So when we talk worker shortage as a leader, we can no longer expect, and I know you already know this, we can't expect that we're just going to find people who want to work for us. It means as a leader that we have to be the leader that they want to stay for. It means we have to be the leader that is having crucial conversations, that is literally seeing the red flags of somebody potentially leaving long before it even comes up as a conversation. The worker shortage is real, which means we have to do a better job as leaders to retain those that we have. We have to do a better job of communicating who we are as a culture in order to attract new people. So Brad, I'll just ask for your input on this one and then we'll keep going. Yeah.
Yeah, my biggest thing in this area, and this is something that I talk about a lot with my team, is that, the definition of leader in the past was very much performance evaluator, manager, overseer. Like the words that would describe leader previously were very different than what needs to describe leader going forward. And those words are motivator, inspirer. Is that a word? It is now.
We'll let it be.
But someone who stands up and says, you know what, I trust that you will perform, and I will evaluate you still on whether you do or you don't. But I'm not going to spend 90% of my time on that performance evaluation. What I'm going to spend the bulk of my time on is getting you to the point, or helping you get to the point where you feel mentored, where you feel inspired, where you feel heard and supported. And I think for a lot of leaders, that's not necessarily been the vernacular that has been used. And as we move farther and deeper into that overall societal culture where people aren't tied to their job because of guilt or feeling like they should, or that they have to pay their dues, a lot of those connections that worked previously don't work going forward. And something that you said, Cheryl, I think needs to resonate with all of us as leaders very deeply, and that is, as people become freelance and as people become their own bosses, so to speak, they will still be part of teams, and you may still be leading those teams. And so you're going to have to adjust yourself to be able to deal with not the tie that you have because they work for the company that you also work for, but the tie that you have because you both have a direction and a goal in mind that you're trying to reach together. And that's a very different form that you have to take from a leadership perspective.
Which is why we're doing Super Crucial Leader Retreat. Because we see the struggles that leaders are having with this, that it requires a whole new reframe of how we see ourselves as leaders. And then therefore, and it's actually very exciting. It doesn't need to be overwhelming. It can be very inspiring to go, oh, wait a second. You mean if I really tap into, if I really embrace this type of leadership, this future ready leadership, then actually the gifts of that are a more autonomous team, greater engagement, greater profitability for the organization, greater innovation. Like the ROI becomes very exponential based on the leader making the commitment to change in this way.
Yeah. There's I think what you just said, everyone should listen to that, because that is right there in a nutshell probably the most important future direction that every leader has to have on their mind.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And I believe in it passionately, as do you, which is why we're doing what we're doing, right? So,
yeah.
So this leads us right into reframing the challenges. Like we can look at them as, oh my gosh, I didn't sign up for this. I have some leaders I'm coaching who are just like, oh, I never had to do like all of this before. And so my response to them is, yes, but you weren't a leader before. Perhaps you were a manager who was focused more on task than on true leadership. Because true leadership is, to your point, Brad, and you said it really well, is inspirer. That true leadership is we are so committed to people. Like for me, I became a leader at the age of 23 in finance. I didn't become a leader because I was good at it. Became a leader because in those days, again, dating myself, in those days, if you showed any initiative, you automatically got promoted. Like that's how it was, right? And I had a tremendous amount of initiative, and I was always very achievement oriented. So that got me into leadership. But I was a victim of, oh, well, now I'm a leader, so everybody will listen to me. And so I did do that autocratic, and I tried to model that male model. And this isn't to say that male leaders are, please be clear with me here, that in that time, it was mostly male leaders. So I didn't have any female mentors or guides or models. And so I modeled what I saw. And that only worked for me for so long before I went, whoa. And I had some really good bosses. One specific female boss who said to me, Cheryl, what got you to where you are is not going to get you to where you want to go. You're going to stop your career because you're focused on results, not people. And so how ironic of what I turned my career into and what we're talking about. However, reframing challenges is something that every great leader, and some people have this innately and others do not. And it's something that becomes a skill. I'm going to put my glasses on for this part, Brad, because I can't read my own.
You know what? I keep mine on the whole time, so it's all good.
Yeah. So hybrid is creating many opportunities, as I alluded to earlier. It is creating greater inclusion. The number of teams that I've talked to where they said to me, Cheryl, I'm so grateful for hybrid because in the past, if I were in the office, I might not have been thought of to be included in a specific project or in a topic. And so it's included diversity as well, greater diversity as far as more global hires. This is the other shift that's happening is we're not just hiring within our own regions anymore. We can hire from anywhere because of hybrid, because of remote work. So that's creating greater diversity of thought and ideas as well. I'm seeing more cross-industry information happening within organizations than ever before, which is helping that organization to drive change and to increase their innovation. So that all three of those, inclusion, diversity, innovation, are huge wins for hybrid. And if we reframe our minds to go, oh, right, like these are the things that are benefiting us and helping us. Also, increase digital transformation. Gone are the days where anybody hopping on to a Zoom can forget to mute their mic or unmute. Or, when you think of pre-pandemic and how people were floundering with the virtual tools, and now what we have is increased digital access, information. A few of the clients that I'm working with, the biggest challenge with digital transformation is the change. Because as human beings, we get comfortable with doing things a certain way, and then we get into repetition, which then turns us into mastery. So it's very difficult to ask a human to take away their mastery and start over new again with something that they don't know. So what I'm seeing with increased digital transformation is the companies that are overlaying change leadership with it are doing very well. The companies that are just throwing digital transformation onto people are struggling because they're not looking at the human element, which is how do I get this person to see that this digital change is in their benefit, that it's going to help them in the long run. So taking the time to have those remote virtual conversations around change or digital transformation, or taking the time to have more virtual team meetings overall, these are the things that hybrid is creating opportunity. And honestly, Brad, you said earlier, when we're in person, the connection and those crucial conversations can seem to be easier. However, the skill of virtually being intimate. And I mean that from a connectedness, like, so we can still be connected virtually.
Yeah.
It's just the screen can present a barrier to that. We can feel like, oh, I'm not looking you eye to eye in person, so therefore I can't. But that's untrue. As a coach, and I know, Brad, with you having a lot of virtual meetings, I've had really powerful virtual breakthrough conversations with people that the only thing that is required is for me to put aside my ego,
Hmm.
for me to be really present with that individual, and to imagine that I'm there with them in person versus that barrier of the screen.
Yeah, it's there are advantages and disadvantages. In a lot of ways, the screen also represents a little bit of a shield against vulnerability. Sometimes you
Yeah.
can be more vulnerable when you have the screen in front of you, and some of those conversations get much deeper than they would in person because, again, like I was saying earlier, previously, from a society perspective, we still had walls up. They just weren't the screens
Yeah.
that we have now, and so there are plenty of in-person conversations that I've had with either, in business relationships or personal relationships where you just don't go there because there's an imaginary wall between you and
Yep.
you just, and that's in person. And sometimes, if you do the things that you just laid out, Cheryl, often, when you're screens apart, you can be more vulnerable. You can be more real. You
Absolutely.
can be more authentic. So again, that hybrid opportunity is not just for work, it's for humanism, right? Like it's there are opportunities in our virtual world and there are opportunities in our real world. And melding the two together is really what leaders need to be thinking about.
Yeah, and it comes down to humanity. So, if somebody's watching and they're going, "Well, how do I be intimate if there's a screen there?" Like, what? It comes down to emotional intelligence.
Yes.
So, if we as an individual have exercised our empathy muscle, or we have acknowledged where we're struggling, those are things that are not easy for leaders, because we're innately, leaders are meant to have ego. Ego is what drives us. Ego allows us to get things done. Ego is not an evil thing. Ego is a necessary distribution channel for who we are. And I would say that, with Super Crucial Leader Retreat, it's getting to that place of, how do I be that whole human while not giving up who I am? In other words, not becoming, because I have had a lot of leaders say, "Well, Cheryl," because I talk about compassion, and I've had a lot of leaders say to me, "Well, Cheryl, when is too much compassion? Like, everybody's walking all over you." And my answer to that is, compassion is centered in human to human. I'm a human, you're a human. I can't imagine what you're going through, but I can feel it for you, which means I can be present with it for you.
Right.
I'm not going to avoid it. I'm not going to deny it. I'm not going to gloss over it. I'm going to be here with it, with you.
Yeah.
That's a leadership skill that we've not been taught, because we've been taught to have boundaries. We've been taught to be professional. We've been taught that too much compassion means you're letting people get away with things. One thing I want to make very clear about compassion is it requires mutual accountability. So if I have an employee and I say, "What's going on? You seem to be struggling lately. Like, you seem to not be on your game. What's
Mhm.
going on?" And let's say that person says to me, "Well, I'm going through, a personal challenge right now, and it's affecting my work." Okay, thank you so much for having the courage to share that.
Yeah.
How
Yeah.
can we together come up with resources and solutions for you that is going to work with this? And then the mutual accountability is, is this something that you need to take time away from? Is
Yeah.
this something that you're willing to work through with? Do I have your permission to give you tools and ideas? So that's compassion,
Yeah.
right?
It's someone said to me once, Cheryl, and I'll never forget this. Being a true leader is not expecting your team to rise where you are, but it's walking out to meet them halfway.
Yep.
And I think when we look at it from that perspective and understand, it talks to what you were saying about mutual accountability. It's that as a leader, sometimes you have to do half the walking to get to a
Yep.
neutral place, because your team might not be able to make it all the way to where you are. And being able to see that, it's not a sign of weakness. It's not a sign of letting people get away with anything. It's not a
No.
sign of less performance. It's actually a sign of awareness. It's a sign of connection. It's a sign of understanding. And any great leader, if you look throughout history, very few great leaders that are respected and admired expected people to come to where they were. They often walked to where people were.
Well, and even Steve Jobs, who, you've read his biography, I've read it, people have read it. Like, he was not a compassionate leader.
No.
He wasn't compassionate in his behavior, but he was compassionate to humanity.
Correct.
Because
Yes.
that's why he created what he created, right?
Correct.
So,
Yes.
so yeah, we could talk forever because you and I are, yeah. And then this leads right into that last point of leadership skill development. Everything Brad and I are talking about in these LinkedIn lives comes right back to, asking ourselves honestly, do I have the latest, most researched, most validated, most effective future ready skills to help myself and my team be as successful as they possibly can? And leadership skill development, it's not enough to do Coursera. It's not enough to do an online course. Those are all great. They help, they augment the learning.
Mhm.
Brad and I created Super Crucial Leader Retreat because we believe people want to come together in very focused time periods to address these things in a very human to human way. Doesn't mean we won't have virtual components, but we'll leave that for a surprise in future. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the hybrid working culture, this is the opportunity here is, again, what I said earlier, culture is not location specific. Here's the big opportunity, leaders. It's time to redefine culture. Now, depending on your position, you might say, well, I don't have the power to do that, Cheryl. If you're the
Mhm.
CEO watching, you definitely have the power. If you're a senior executive, you definitely have the power. And guess what? No matter what level of leader you are, you have the power, because you can have an overall company culture. And then how many of you know that there are team cultures within that company culture? So the opportunity is to redefine culture as a leader. What does culture mean for you? And this is a whole exercise that we take people through at the retreat, is an opportunity for you to leave with, how do you to redefine culture? And then how do you embed that culture that you're wanting to create for the organization? This is a big one. It's more than time than we have here. But culture and leading hybrid working culture is a huge opportunity for us as leaders to really question some of our beliefs. Like, what do I believe to be true about culture? What do I believe to be true about how people work? Do I have hard work bias? That's another bias. So we can believe that we work really hard, but others don't. So that those biases can get in the way of us being that really next level leader that we all aspire to be. And then, what are the opportunities of worker shortage? Well, it's causing us to rethink work. When I said earlier about more freelancers, more entrepreneurs, Brad said it really well. Like, the type of leadership to lead entrepreneurial people, very different than leading people who are just following, who are just doing what we tell them to do. And so think of yourself as a leader, and you may already be leading a number of entrepreneurial people, but it requires you to be on your toes 24/7. You've got to be on top of the latest research. You've got to be on top of the trends, the social trends. You've got to be on top of psychology, like how people think and what motivates them and why do they do what they do. And I say all that not to overwhelm you, but to just reframe leadership and to go, okay, yeah, again, 2 decades ago, did I have to be a psychologist? No, I just had to tell people what to do, and they did it. And if they didn't do it, they were fired. Today, if you say to somebody, do this or you're fired, they look at you like those fembots in the Austin Powers movies, like, does not compute.
Right.
And they don't, right? They just, like, it's not a threat. It's just like, oh, okay, well, moving on. Yeah, no.
Well, we've lost those traditional ties that a lot of leaders rely on. It's almost like
Yes,
the parental relationship
yes.
that organizations used to have with their people. Like, the days of that are gone. Like, there is no, parental, um, you know,
Autocratic, top
exactly,
down. No,
dictatorship. Like, people just
no.
do not buy into that trope. anymore
No,
at all.
it's no longer effective, and we see that.
Yeah.
And leaders, I coach a lot of leaders. I know you interact with a lot of leaders, Brad, as well, and advise. Um, the leaders that are stuck in that mentality are the ones that are struggling right now.
Yeah.
The ones who are stuck going, well, why aren't people doing what I tell them to do?
Right.
I say to them, reframe the question. How does my leadership need to change so people are inspired to do what I'm asking them to do?
Yeah.
So that again is that reframe, right? So creative recruiting. I'm thinking of a client that I worked with a while back in Portland, Oregon, with a HVAC organization, where they were having trouble recruiting, and so we went through a creative exercise where I said, okay, let's look at your top employees. Like, what do they have in common? Not their work ethic, but personal life. What do they have in common? Let's look at the whole picture. And what we found is a lot of their top HVAC workers like to hunt or fish. And now you might think, well, what's that got to do with anything? Well, what we did is we created a recruiting booth at a hunting and gaming show, and they recruited at least a quarter of their team. So those are like, that's a creative recruiting idea. And there's more of those where that came from.
Mm-hmm.
So if recruiting is a challenge, let me tell you, there are really creative ways that people are finding the right people for their organization.
Mm-hmm.
Community partnering. That's another opportunity with worker shortage. I've done a fair amount of work with universities, and more universities, rather than be degree focused or certificate focused, they're now being community partner focused. How do we create education that links up with what workers and what employers are looking for? So there's more of that opportunity happening. Hybrid offering. If you are posting new jobs and you don't have a hybrid offering, you are going to be overlooked. And when I say hybrid, some level of flexibility. So maybe that's 1 day in the office, maybe it's 2 days in the office, maybe, or if it's fully remote, but opportunity for organizations to really clarify their hybrid offering. And then lastly, flexible workplace, because another item that I get brought up by people is, or leaders when I'm presenting is, well, what about those who have no choice? They can't work hybrid. They have to be on site because of the nature of their work. For example, manufacturing or warehouse or those types of work. And my answer to that is it comes back to flexible. Do you have 3 days on, 2 days off? Do you have flexible hours? Are you giving them flexible vacationing? You have to still have flexibility in there if hybrid is not an option. So we covered a lot in like 42 minutes, Brad. So I'm going to let us in these last 3 minutes just sort of do a high level of everything we talked about today. These are just 3 of the challenges. There are multitudes more. And I think if anybody watching or listening or is going to watch as the recording, the opportunity here is we are living in a time where we have to reframe the challenges into opportunities. That is what a resilient, inspirational leader does. Mm-hmm. Thoughts?
Yeah, 100%, Cheryl. I think that for a lot of leaders who have been very successful, in some ways, if you're a blank slate, it's probably easier to do some of these things. But I know for myself, and I only talk from my own personal experience, it's almost more difficult to get past some of my habits and past some of my ways of thinking and really look deep enough inside and say, okay, where do I need to adjust here? Where do I need to, make changes? But, like any great leader is going to have to put that work in. And that's the work that I think we all need to be doing as leaders, is asking ourselves, how can I show up in a way that is going to service the team in the best possible way? I think that, for a lot of these things, we can look at these challenges and say, okay, well, they're challenges because the people that I'm leading are causing a risk in what I expect. But you can't look at it that way. Like, you really have to say to yourself, is it a challenge because of what they're doing, or is it a challenge because of the way you think? And that was a tough lesson for me to learn. And because it's easy for us to externalize why, it might be more difficult to be a leader today. But it's not external. Society's going to change. Humans are going to change. Expectations are going to change. If you don't change along with them, and that's why these retreats are so important. I think that this is why, when we first had our conversation about them, Cheryl, why I was so passionate about working with you on these, because, I came to the realization for myself that the only way for me to control how I could be a better leader was to internalize these challenges and say, how would I solve them if the external team had no influence whatsoever? If they were not there, what could I do as a leader to push that envelope and to make those changes? And I think if you can do that, it goes back to what we were saying, the walking the halfway. And that's ultimately why I think these retreats are so important, is that this will give all of us the ability to know how to walk halfway so that our teams can meet us. And together we can solve these challenges that are facing probably every leader today.
Yeah, no, really, really well said. And I would say that one of the models, to your point about, blaming the team, which is a very common common response, right? I have a model that I share that I would be sharing at the retreat around how do we take it from blame to upping our game. And so the first step, like you're cognizant and your awareness of that is huge. And a lot of leaders just being made aware that they are blaming versus upping their game is a massive pivot that can transform everything.
Right.
So, and that model is something I've shared with leaders for over a decade now, and is highly effective. So there's so much gold in what you and I are bringing with our expertise together. And so for anyone watching, listening, please go to supercrucialleader.com. Please take a look at the curriculum and what we're going to be doing for 3 days. Please join us in Vancouver. We would absolutely be thrilled to have you join us and to have some really deep, meaningful conversations like what we're sharing on these LinkedIn Lives. Thank you for your time and attention, everyone. Brad, thank you as always. And we're doing a third LinkedIn Live next week, next Monday. Join us for that one as well. And we wish you all the best. Have a great rest of the week. Take care.
See you then. Bye-bye.